Hi, I'm Mark, and this is my comparison review of all the different organizers available for Gloomhaven. If you don't know what Gloomhaven is, it is this giant board game that is awesome. I'm a Gloomhaven evangelist. I think it's a great game. I think everyone should play, but it has a lot of parts to it. The game manual actually says it comes with over 2,600 pieces, and there's not really any sort of organizational system included with the game when you buy it. It's just all those pieces. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to play, you want some way to organize those things and keep track of them. When I was looking for an organizer, I found that there are some reviews of different ones and some comments on different ones that you can find online, but they're kind of scattered around throughout, and you really had to search to find all the different ones that were available and then search again to find information about each of them and whether people like them. So what I'm hoping to do with this review is save a lot of other people that work. I've compiled information on 10 different organizers, the pros and cons of each, what I like, what I don't. And so hopefully, if you're looking for an organizer, which again I highly recommend if you're going to be playing Gloomhaven, this gives you a way to quickly sort of find out what all those are and figure out which one might work well for you, including links to where you can find more information and buy all 10 of them that I'm going to talk about. And so hopefully this will save you a lot of the work that I had to do when I was looking for an organizer. Okay, what would be awesome would be if there was a perfect organizer I found out of all the different ones I looked at and could say, this is the one everyone should get. It's great. It does everything right. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be one of those. I'm reviewing 10 different ones here, and none of them actually, I think, accomplishes everything that you would really want out of an organizer perfectly well. There's some that are pretty severely flawed across the board that I wouldn't recommend, but there are at least 3 or 4 that have some things that might make them a good fit for certain people. They each have some different strengths and different weaknesses, so when I go through those, hopefully you can see which things you consider more important, and that'll help you decide which might be the best organizer for you. I'm not getting paid by or endorsing any of these organizers. The only transaction I've had with any of these companies was the one I decided to buy. I paid them money to buy that, and now I have it. A disclaimer, the only one of these organizers I've actually used is the one that I myself bought. So the other ones, I'm just going off of the information that's available online, the photos and comments and reviews from other people who have used them. So I think the information's pretty accurate. But again, if you're interested in a particular one, I suggest you look into that one and do some research yourself and make sure it's going to work for what you want it to. In terms of the structure, I'm going to go through the organizers that I don't think are very good first and kind of breeze through those pretty quickly. I'll provide a link and tell you a little bit about why I don't like them, but I want to spend more time on the few that I think are pretty good and talk about what the strengths and weaknesses of each of those are in a little more detail so you can get a sense of which one you think might be best for you. They each have sort of strengths in different areas, so kind of depending which factors you consider more important or less important, that might push you towards one or the other. But I want to spend more time on those. So I'll start out by going through some of the ones that, again, I don't particularly like, but I want you to know they're out there so you kind of get the full gamut of things. And lastly, I'll note that when I was looking for organizers, there were actually a couple more options than there are now. It seems like the market may have shrunk a little bit or consolidated. None of the ones I really liked disappeared, but there were a couple that I didn't like that are no longer available, so I'm leaving those out. So there were some other ones that you might be able to find used or something else that I'm not going to review here, but those aren't really the ones I'd recommend anyway. Okay, let's start with a couple that you can find on Etsy from, I assume, smaller manufacturers or individuals who are doing this as like a craft hobby. This first one is from a company called BasicallyWooden. And what I don't like about this one is I think it's hard to find what you're looking for a lot of times. One of the things I'm really looking for in an organizer is that it helps me set up the game faster and get right into the gameplay. This one, I think it's kind of hard to find what you're looking for. The map tiles are nicely laid out in this tray here, that almost all of them are in one place, but it's hard to know where what you're looking for is. And also, most of these map tiles have something else on the reverse side, and Using this organizer, I don't know where those are, what I'm looking for. I almost have to take each tile and sort of take it out, flip it over, look what's on the back to find those. So I find that a little frustrating. The monsters are stored sideways and sort of deep in these slots where you can tell it's kind of hard to see exactly what you're looking at, and there's no labels on them. So again, when you're setting up the game and looking for a particular kind of monster or a baddie, I think it's not super convenient to look through these and find it. You have to go through a lot of these little trays and really kind of look around things to find exactly what you're looking for. I don't think that's great. The other thing I don't particularly like about this is there are some odd choices in how things are organized. Gloomhaven takes up a fair amount of table space when you're playing it, so I'm always looking for, okay, what are things I can sort of put off to the side and not need around on the table while I'm actually playing. So in this case, the map tiles, I like that those are all in one tray because I can set up my map and then I can put those off to the side and I don't need it while I'm playing. They have a separate tray that has all the hit point and status trackers in one tray, which makes sense, but then there's also boulders in there, which are map tiles, and if I needed those, I would have already pulled them. So that's kind of taking up extra space in the tray, which means extra space on my table that I don't really want taken up with that. Meanwhile, there are other things that I do need out, like the summons or the coins, and those are in a separate tray instead of in the spot where these boulders are, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Finally, the card trays for this, remember there's a lot of cards in Gloomhaven, have some dividers provided. I don't really think there's as many as you'd probably want. And personally, I don't like that these come in multiple boxes. So there's 3 boxes for small cards, 2 boxes for large cards. And I think in some ways that could help you organize things and keep things separated the right way. But it also means you have to pull out more and more different boxes to find what you're looking for. So I'm not a big fan of that one. Another one that's available on Etsy is from a company called GameFit. This one is a little bit cheaper. And this kind of has everything separated out, but not really labeled. Even the card box has a lot of dividers, but no labels on them. Some of the room tiles would be hard to see without taking them out. And again, they're not labeled. You can't even really see one side, much less both. So you end up having to take out all of these map tiles just to look for the thing you're looking for. That's taking a lot of setup time. And again, that's time I'm not playing, that I'm busy just looking for things to set up in the first place. A lot of things, it seems like, just lay loose in a large tray on the top. So all your monster stat sheets, the stat sheet sleeves, the bosses, the plastic bases, and they've sort of arranged them very nicely in this picture so everything looks organized. But you can imagine after you've gotten this box out of your closet and carried it over to the table and it's moved around a little bit, that's just all going to be a mess in that large tray. I don't like that. I want my things organized a little bit better. Basically, this is one that seems more about just having a place for everything, so a way to store Gloomhaven, than it does something that actually helps you set up or play the game faster. So not a fan of this. Keeping with the organizers that I'm not a big fan of, there's one from a company called E-raptor. This is sold out of Europe, I believe, because the pricing is in euros. Something I do like about this is it has a nice design for the monster action cards, each separated into its own slot for kind of easy access. So you're like, I just want to pull the Living Bones cards, and you can quickly look, find those, and pull those right out. That's great. I love that aspect of the design. Aside from the monster action cards, it doesn't seem like the rest of the cards are organized or divided up very well. There's some dividers, but not enough. You need some additional way to keep track of things and separate things. So for instance, what road events are available, what ones are not, what items are available, what items are not. Additionally, they have kind of 2 giant trays for all the tokens and monsters and map tiles and everything. And I'm not a big fan of this because, again, during the gameplay, you're going to need some of these things. You're going to need some of the things from both trays. So your options are to either sort of dump out certain sections of those trays onto the table, and then you just have a lot of loose pieces that you have to put back later, or you have to keep both these trays accessible the whole time you're playing. That takes up a lot of space on your table, and again, makes it harder to find what you're looking for in the first place because everything's sort of all mixed together. There's no real logic to what is where, and no labels on the individual slots within each tray to know, again, what's there or what's on the reverse side of 2-sided things. I don't know, I haven't used this one, so it might be possible to organize things differently, but at least in the photos on their website, there's some really weird choices to how things are split between the two trays. So for instance, some of the hit point tokens are in one tray and some are in the other, and that's something that you really would be accessing all of them at the same time. If I need to put 6 points of damage on a monster, I don't want to have to go to one tray to find the one and then have to look all the way through the other tray to find a 5-point token to add to that one. So I just think the way they have the monster action cards separated is great. I love that. Just about everything else about this organizer I don't think works real great. Sticking with the theme of the organizers I don't particularly like, there's one from Folded Space that I saw previously listed under GameGuard. I think that's a separate company that was just selling the Folded Space one. This is an inexpensive one, so it has that going for it. It's made out of foam, whereas most of the other ones we're looking at are made out of wood or particle board or something a little sturdier like that. This is probably one of the worst ones organizationally, I think. In most cases, you have to dump a lot of stuff out and search through them for the right pieces. For instance, all the status tokens are in one little box, so your character gets wounded and you need a wound token, and you're digging through all these other tokens and trying to find that one within it. That's, again, slowing down the gameplay, and I'm spending time looking for a piece I need instead of being able to find it quickly and use it and keep going with the game. All the map tiles are in 2 boxes, and again, stored in a way that I kind of have to look through everything to find what I'm looking for, pull a lot of stuff out. I don't really like that. The monsters are stored in a couple different style of boxes, seemingly at random. So some are sort of face up so you can see them well. Others are stored vertically in slots so you can't see them as well. There doesn't seem to be any logic to how each is stored other than where it fits, but again, this seems to me like something where I'm going to have to spend a lot of time looking through a bunch of different places to find the particular monster I'm interested in, and depending on which one it is and how it's stored, it might be kind of hard for me to see it on a quick glance. I actually have to look pretty closely around some of the ones, you know, in front and behind it if it's one of these stored vertically. I don't really like that. The card holders are decent. There are some dividers, although there's no labels on them, so you'd have to have some organizational scheme that you're keeping in your head, but at least there's a way to divide up some of those. This is speculation, but there's no lids on some of the containers that go on top when this is put away. And I do worry if the box got jostled, how many pieces would just sort of fall out of those boxes. Most of the organizers have some trays and such that are sitting open, but generally there's something sitting on top of them to keep things in place, and the boxes on top are closed up. This one I have sort of open boxes sitting at the top, and it looks like with actually some space between them and the lid. I basically think this is another organizer that solves the problem of you need containers for this stuff, but not much more than that. It's not really doing anything to help you with setup or gameplay going faster or more smoothly. Okay, the last one in this category of organizers I really wouldn't recommend is this one from, I think it's pronounced Daedalus. Right up front, let's say this is probably the coolest looking one out of all the organizers out there. I like the color scheme they've gone with. It really sort of fits the mood and vibe of Gloomhaven. So I think they did a really nice job with the color and text design and everything like that. This one looks really cool. I dig it. Everything is separated out pretty well, so it's got that going for it. I like that the monster action cards are separated out by type and labeled. That's handy, and again makes it easier when you're looking for a particular monster. You can find the cards that go along with it quite easily. So given those things, I really wanted to like this one, but there are just some things that are kind of deal breakers for me. One is that a lot of these things are stored vertically and it's hard to see what they are. So you'd have to, like with some of these other ones I've talked about, pull out things individually to kind of see what you're looking for. Some of these things are labeled on the sides of the containers, but that's not super helpful if the labeling is hard to read and not everything's labeled in the first place. A bunch of the reviews said because of the particular color design they've gone with, the text is really hard to read, and in some cases the color and staining doesn't quite work right to make it legible. The other negative to me is this is another one where it looks like you'd have to have a lot of the inserts out during gameplay or dump stuff out onto the table. The things that you need regular access to are scattered across a whole bunch of different boxes. So again, you're talking about a lot of table space having to be taken up by those. So if you're really into the look of this one or want one that looks really cool, this is maybe one worth taking a look at. I just think the organizational scheme and the way the things are stored means it's going to take more setup time than I really want to do. Again, it's not helping me get right into the gameplay, so I was not a huge fan of this one. Okay, so now we move on from the organizers I really don't like to 3 organizers that have some pros and some things to recommend them for. They're not my favorites, which I'll get to at the end, but I do think there's some reasons you might want to buy one of these. The first is another one that's available on Etsy from a company called TowerRex. It's nice looking, looks like there's some flexibility in the ways that you can organize the cards. I like how the monsters are separated. They're also labeled. It's a little inconvenient the way the boxes are. You need to kind of look at the box from both directions to see all the labels because they're kind of labeled facing each other. But still, it has labels that you can read, so that's nice. The map tiles are spread out nicely so you can see them. This does have the same issue that some of the other ones I talked about earlier have, that it's not clear what's on each side of the tiles. So you might have to flip over some of the tiles to see what they are. So that's not great. It's okay. Some of the early reviews of this, some people talked about actually some of the wood splintering a little bit. The later reviews, I didn't see that as much, so that might be something they fixed, but just something to be aware of. Anyway, this is not one of my favorites, but the nice thing this has going for it is it's inexpensive. At least at the moment, it's listed at $28, which is one of the cheaper organizers you can get. So for an organizer that has some strengths to it, that's a great price. That's why I listed it in this segment. Next up is the MeepleRealty organizer. I think this has some things that are really well designed. I like how they do the status condition, the coins, the hit points trackers. All of those are in one convenient dual layer tray to use while gaming. It's nice and condensed. You can put it right on the table and have easy access to all those. I think the dual layer design is very handy. It saves on table space and makes that one-stop shopping for all of that. I also like how one of the trays even has a little kind of curve to the lip for it, so you can more easily slide things out of it. It does have labels for all the monsters and the map overlays and stuff like that, so that's good. The labels are on the lids, so it's a little less convenient than the labels being by the tiles themselves, because you have to keep the lid next to the tray so that you can see what things correspond to what. You know, in the big scheme of things, that's not a huge issue. Usually the monsters and the map tiles are things you're taking out at the beginning of a scenario, so you can put the lid next to it, get what you need, and then sort of set all of that to the side. So that's good. Not a huge fan of the way they've done the terrain hex tiles. Those are something where they can, seems like they might be able to slide into each other's compartments, and you can't see what they are from above while you're looking at them. Now again, the lid has the labels on it, so this is better than some of the earlier organizers I mentioned where you really can't tell what things are without taking everything else. But I still think that it's not the most convenient way to look at these. I don't like that it has a big kind of catch-all tray for a whole bunch of stuff at the top. Again, that's not uncommon in many of these organizers, but I don't think it's great. There's some ability to organize your large and small cards. They provide some extra dividers, which is very handy. One note, so sleeved cards, if you're not familiar with that, and I honestly wasn't before I got into this game, is if you have cards in a game that are going to be seeing a lot of use, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of shuffling, you can buy little plastic sleeves that fit over the cards and basically protect them through heavy use. And there are a lot of cards in Gloomhaven that get, you know, shuffled multiple times per game. And if you think of you're playing this over, you know, 50, 60, 70 scenarios, those cards are going to get pretty beat up. So I would recommend sleeving the cards if you feel so inclined. The description says the tray only holds 4 character sleeved cards at a time, which implies to me that if you're changing characters, you would need to sort of take the sleeves off of those cards and put the sleeves on different cards. So if you're going to sleeve your cards, may not be ideal. Overall, I think this is a generally good design. I like this organizer a fair amount. I think if you're not going to sleeve your cards, it would be definitely one worthy of consideration. I really like the dual layer tray, and there's nothing that's terrible about the organization. Some of it isn't exactly the way I'd like, but it's fine. The third and final organizer in this sort of medium category of things that I like enough to potentially recommend but aren't in my favorite category is from LaserOx. And this one I believe also comes out of Europe, and the list price online is in euros. It's similar to the MeepleRealty one in style in that it has everything in individual small boxes. So there are a lot of different boxes to this as opposed to some other ones that sort of fit more things into a smaller number of trays. It has a dual layer box for conditions and coins, so that's similar to the MeepleRealty one. I think the MeepleRealty one's a little better designed. This one you still need a second box for the summon tokens and the hit point tokens. Not a huge fan of the overall organization. I think it splits things into too many small boxes, but at least the way they're split makes sense. The map tiles have a similar problem as with a lot of the other organizers in that you don't know what's on the bottom of these dual layer tiles. One thing that's cool that LaserOx does, it does have printable dividers to help sort through the monster action cards or their attack deck. There's not a lot of these dividers provided, but on their website they have PDFs that you can download and print out of these to help you sort through things, which is kind of cool. One other note about this, so all the map hexes and the monsters, the trays are labeled, so I like that. There's labels for each little slot in those of what's in there. The problem is they're labeled on the bottom. So once you put some monsters in the monster tray, you see the picture, but you can't see the label anymore. So if you don't know, which of these is a flame demon and which one is a sun demon, you actually need to take the monsters out, look at the label beneath it to see. I think that's better than no labeling. I think it's worse than if you could see the labels while the monsters or the map tiles are in there. And I actually probably think it's a little worse than the MeepleRealty design where they're on the lid. In that case, you still have to keep the lid next to it, but at least you can sort of see the lid and the tiles at the same time. This one's okay. I think since it's in the same range as the MeepleRealty one, I would probably go for that out of the two of these, but they're both okay and have some things to recommend them. Lastly, we get to my favorite two designs. As I said earlier, I don't think any organizer that's out there right now is perfect. I wish there was one. These are the two that I think come the closest. They each have a couple things that are minor annoyances about them, but overall are very strong. And they each do one thing that's kind of unique to that organizer that I haven't seen elsewhere. So the first of these two comes from BrokenToken. This is probably the most popular organizer, or maybe they pay the most for advertising, I'm not sure, but if you search Gloomhaven organizers online, this is the first one that comes up most of the time. The unique thing that this one does is it provides separate tuck boxes for each of the monster types. So there's a box provided when you buy the organizer, and in that box you put all the action cards for that monster, all the little cardboard standees, and their monster stat sheet. This is really pretty cool. One of the things you spend some time searching for when you're setting up the game is whatever monsters are going to be in that scenario, you have to find their little cardboard standees, you have to find their stat sheet, and you have to find their deck of action cards. None of those things are particularly hard or take a ton of time, but you're looking through 3 different places for things. Here it's really cool that if you open up a scenario and it says, okay, I need a bandit archer, you grab a box that says archer and it has all that stuff in it. I will say some people online have noted these boxes aren't ideal, particularly for some of the monsters that have more cardboard standees, that it can be a little hard to kind of get everything back into the box at the end of this scenario, and that's a little annoying. Some others have said that these are kind of annoying to be pulling out mid-game, although usually what you would do is pull out the monster types for that scenario before. So I'm noting that there are some comments online about this organizer that some people found that setup a little obnoxious. I do think it's still pretty unique and saves some time relative to any of the other options, because your other options, at least of what's available, all involve having to look multiple places for things about any individual type of monster. There's some adjustable card slots in terms of how you're organizing your small and large cards. There's a good logic to the organization of the tiles and tokens. Status tokens are separated and in a small tray that you can leave on the table. Same thing for the hit point trackers, the coins, and the summon trackers. Again, the things you want to have out are in their own individual little small trays that you can leave on the table without taking up a ton of real estate. So that's all good. I like a lot of things about this one. The reason why I ended up not buying it has to do with how the characters are stored. There's 17 characters in the game. This organizer provides space to store 13 of them in the original tuck boxes, and the other 4 you put into these active character trays. So these would be the characters your party is currently playing. You fold up their tuck boxes and you put all their materials into these active character trays. Now that's convenient if you're playing with the same group and the same characters all the time. You come back for your next game and you grab those 4 character trays, you throw them out on the table, and you're ready to go. That's great if you're always playing with the same 4 characters. My particular scenario, I knew I was in a group where we were going to be changing out players and characters pretty regularly, and this actually gets pretty obnoxious. When you change to a different character, you have to sort of rebuild the tuck box for the old one, put all the pieces back in that, take the character from the new one, break down their tuck box, put all the pieces into it. And so I would say this is a great organizer if you know you're always going to be playing with the same people who are playing the same characters over multiple scenarios until a character retires. If you're going to be, changing out who's playing in your party or what characters they're playing regularly, this is probably not a great organizer for you. Some people also complain that even if you're only playing 2 or 3 characters, so if you and your spouse are generally just playing it as a 2-person, or you're playing solo running 2 characters, or you have a normal group of 3 instead of 4, you still have to take out 4 characters to put into the character trays, or the organizer doesn't work. You can't fit things back in the box. It's really only designed to always have 4 characters out and store the other 13 in the original tuck boxes. So, a lot of good things to recommend about this. How your group normally plays and how often you're going to be changing out characters makes the difference of whether this is going to be right for you. The final organizer is the one I actually bought. It's from Go7 Gaming. I like a lot of the labeling on this. The trays make it very clear what's in each slot, what goes in each slot. You can see the labels. Most of the time, even when the characters or map tiles are in there, in a couple of cases, if there's a thick stack of things, you might not be able to read it fully well. For all the map tiles, you can see what's on both the front and the back of them, which is great. There are adjustable and labeled card dividers for the small and large cards. I think of all the organizers, this might be the best in terms of how it organizes those, with the exception that the monster attack decks are kind of grouped into a couple large categories, where there's a stack of monsters A through G. And you can put them in alphabetically, but you still have to flip through them a little bit to find what you're looking for. I actually put in little paperboard dividers between them so I could at least see where one monster's deck starts and the next one ends to make that easier. Some things are a tight fit in some of the insert trays, but they provide little keys to pull the stuff out of the boxes, which is great. The unique thing that this organizer does is it gets rid of the tuck boxes entirely and transfers all the characters into individual wooden boxes. This worked really well for my particular group because it makes it very easy to grab a character and you've got all of their stuff together, their miniature, their attack modifier cards, their tokens, and easy to put things away and take them back out. I found myself that putting things back in and out of the tuck boxes that come with the game was something of a hassle and didn't work great. Everything would get kind of messed up in there. I'd be kind of shaking the box to, get the last little tracker tokens out of there. So I didn't find those were great. I think this works really well for how it holds the characters. For instance, we get this one here for Spellweaver, and inside we have character card. You have room to fold up your status sheet. There's a little slot here where your figure fits in via the base. You'll notice I've had these painted. Your little tracker tokens go in this little box up here in the corner. All your modifier cards for your attack modifier decks, the ones that you get via perks, show up in here. You can see these are all marked with the Spellweaver icon. And all of my various action cards fit into here. So the nice thing about this is it consolidates all of this into one place, and there actually is room for additional cards. So for instance, if I'm going to play with the same characters all the time and I want to have one of the regular attack decks and leave this in here as well, I can. There's also room to fit my item cards in here as well. So really you can have everything for this entire character all in this one box, and then you're ready to play and you just pull this out and give it to whoever's playing. One of the downsides to it, which is worth saying, is you have to transfer all the characters into these. So characters that are still locked, when you buy this organizer, you still have to open up those boxes and transfer them into here. You could have a friend do it if you don't want to ruin the surprise, or you can do what I did, which was just sort of do them by feel without looking at them. So I still don't know what some of the locked characters are, even though I've already opened them and transferred them. So that's totally doable. It is a little bit obnoxious if you're worried about ruining some of the surprises with the unlockable content, because there's the potential you'll accidentally see something that you didn't want to. The one other thing I don't like about this organizer that is easily solvable but a little obnoxious to have to do it yourself is that once the characters are in all these wooden boxes, the way that you have to put them back in the box, you can't see which box corresponds to what character. All the boxes look identical, so you'd actually have to pull them out to find the character you are looking for. I solved this by printing out little stickers with each character's icon on them and putting those stickers on top of the boxes so they're visible when everything's packed up. That works fine for me. It's not a huge hassle, but it does seem like something that the designers could have taken care of easily when making the organizer, not something you should have to do yourself when you buy it. All that said, overall for me, this is the best setup, particularly for my scenario where I know we're changing out characters regularly. There's nothing that I think is actually bad about this organizer, whereas some of the other ones have serious issues. The thing that I wish it did better is organizing the monster action cards to be a little more accessible for individual monsters rather than having to go through a sort of deck of them. I think the way BrokenToken handles that is really cool, and there's a couple other organizers I mentioned that I think do some nice stuff with that as well. That's probably the weakest aspect of this, and the fact that you have to transfer all the characters out of their tuck boxes into this new thing. There is a tray that you can order separately for Go7 Gaming that goes on the top to sort of hold all these things, and as well as the map tiles. I went with a file folder like this. You can see the little labels there showing which map tiles go in each, and then I used the front couple pocket to fit in my instructions and scenario booklet and all that. And this just sits on top here. I'll be honest, I don't think that's great. It does make the game sit a little higher. I can't close my box top all the way. A little bit here like that. But the map tiles is one thing that none of the organizers really seem to have a good handle on how to deal with. A lot of them just put them in some sort of tray laying around on top. I found one of the big challenges and things that slowed me down in setup was finding the right map tiles for each particular scenario. The file folder does make the game box sit a little higher, but it does make the organization a lot easier and set up a lot quicker. I can go right to the letter for the tiles I'm looking for. I have them in numbered order within each of those and really quickly pull out exactly the tiles I need. Again, if there was an organizer that had a great solution to that, that would be awesome. This ultimately seemed like the solution that's the most effective. So that's my review of all the various Gloomhaven organizers that are out there, or at least the ones that I was able to find. I hope it's useful to you and helped you figure out what one might be best suited for your needs. There's one additional thing I want to mention. As I'm recording this, which is May 2019, the first official expansion for Gloomhaven, called Forgotten Circles, has just been released. This includes a new playable characters, a whole bunch of new scenarios, some new monster types, new items, new city events, so a whole bunch of content. Sounds pretty cool. I have not had a chance to play this. I literally just got it. You don't have to complete the original Gloomhaven campaign to play this, but you have to be a fair ways into the game. So even though this is available right now, if you just started playing Gloomhaven, you're not really supposed to start this one yet anyway. The reason I'm mentioning this in an organizer video is that all the new content from this won't necessarily fit into your existing organizer if you've already bought one or if you're about to go get one. Some of the organizers I mentioned have been redesigned to accommodate the Forgotten Circles content. Some haven't, so if you think you may end up picking that up in the future, it's probably worth looking into whether your organizer could support it. Now, you could always just keep the content for this in its own separate box in addition to Gloomhaven, but if I have this and I have this whole other giant box here, that starts to be a lot of content to lug around. It sure would be nice if I can get it all into one place. I'm not 100% sure on some of the organizers, but I know for sure that the last two I mentioned as my sort of most highly recommended ones, the BrokenToken organizer and the Go7 Gaming one, have both been redesigned, and if you buy them now, they do include storage for the Forgotten Circles content. So everything in here would fit into the organizer in this box. Both of them also have an option if you bought an earlier version of their organizer before they redesigned it, you can purchase a sort of add-on that redesigns how a couple of things fit, and again, we'll make this fit into your main Gloomhaven box. So just something to look out for if you are purchasing an organizer and would like it to potentially be forward compatible if you end up getting this expansion. Look into whether or not it's going to support that. With that, thanks for watching, and again, hope it was useful for you. Also, if you have questions about a particular organizer or how one works or why I liked one or didn't, feel free to leave it in the comments section, and if I have an answer, I'll respond. If I don't have the answer, I'll see if I can point you to a place that might. I can answer questions very specifically about the Go 7 gaming one because that's the one I have myself and have been using. But I did do some research on all the other ones on here, so I might be able to help you out with questions about those as well. If somehow you've stumbled onto this video and watched the entire thing without really even knowing what Gloomhaven is or whether you would like it, I would suggest you can check out my video of Gloomhaven reviewed for casual gamers to see if it's something you think you might enjoy playing or not. And the link for that is at the bottom. And again, the links for all the organizers I reviewed, whether I like them or not, are all included in the text below this video, so you can find more information on any of them there. Thank you.